welcome to Stan Energy Man on No Foolin', April 1st, 2016. We got a great show today. It's the last of our transportation shows for the month of March, which ended up rolling into April. And we've got two great guests here today to talk mostly about EVs, electric powered vehicles, primarily plug-in electric vehicles, but also other alternative vehicles. We got Margaret Larson from the State Energy Office, and we got Makena Coffman from the University of Hawaii. Dr. Coffman's a big wig up there that does transportation analysis, and it's going to predict our future for us and where we got to be and what we can really do to get there. Because Margaret and I just hope we can get there. She's got more brain cells to put together on this and tell us what we're really going to do. So welcome, ladies. Good to have both of you here back again, Margaret, and welcome, Makena. Good to have you here.
Good to be here.
Could we start off with you just giving us a little bit of background on yourself and what you do up at UH and the kind of things that got you interested in doing what you do?
Sure. I'm an associate professor of urban and regional planning at UH Manoa, as well as a research fellow with the University of Hawaii Economic Research Organization. And I have been working in energy issues for about 10 years now, starting with my dissertation work, actually. And the focus has generally been on, early on was generally in the electric sector, but I got really interested in transportation issues, particularly as they relate to the electric sector, but transportation issues broadly through work on greenhouse gas emissions. There was an effort in the state to do a greenhouse gas emissions inventory in 2008. And one of the things that was found in that study was that ground transportation was the fastest growing greenhouse gas emitting sector in our state. So even though it's not necessarily the largest in sum, in terms of the rapid change and increase of greenhouse gas emissions, it was the most prominent. So that's what piqued my interest in transportation issues, and I've been working on it ever since.
Terrific. And Margaret, why don't you update us on what you've been up to lately and a little bit about what the Energy Office is doing and what got you fired up about energy?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show again. Nice to see you.
Always good.
Since the last time we met, or the last time we had our show together, I think that was in November or so, December. Since then, we've been hard at work completing, and we submitted a working group report to the legislature in December focused on how to integrate charging stations in multi-unit dwellings like condos and townhomes, and been busy working with legislative session and trying to incorporate electric vehicle policies and educating the legislature about the opportunities with electric vehicles. And just by way of background, I've been with the Energy Office for about 8 years, helping to manage the Clean Transportation Program, and have been lucky enough to work with Makena previously on the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative of the Clean Transportation Working Group.
And I think all of us are trying to get Hawaii moving forward towards clean transportation. It's a big challenge. There's a lot to do. And we haven't been getting very good grades from Blue Planet, so we're trying to up our grade a little bit. So Margaret, we got some slides that you brought. We want to talk to those slides a little bit about what you've been doing with the Energy Office and some of those condo issues you're dealing with.
Sure. Yeah, great. I thought that I would help to provide a little bit of background as to where we're at with the EV industry here in Hawaii. And so we're just over 4,000 EVs here in Hawaii. And even though that may sound like a lot to some or a little to others, it's just under 0.5% of the total passenger vehicles statewide. We have over 15 models of EVs across the state, so I updated that number today. I had it a little bit lower, so it's nice to see that models continue to come here. And we have over 400 level 2 charging ports and over 50 level 3 charging ports. What that means is those are 450 different locations publicly where EV drivers can plug in. Level 2 and level 3 really depends on the amount of energy that you're going to pull and the amount of time that you're going to be, how fast, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. What's about the next slide we got there?
In terms of our challenges that we have here in Hawaii, we have made a lot of progress in terms of EV adoption. However, we continue to see challenges like other markets across the U.S. in terms of furthering EV adoption. The main challenges nationwide and beyond is really the high battery costs and just the overall cost of electric vehicle, and the uncertain investment of the recharging infrastructure and the cost of charging infrastructure. Also, where's where's the best location to install charging infrastructure. Right now, nearly 40% of Hawaii residents live in condos or apartments, townhomes, and so that is a big challenge when trying to put in charging stations, and I'll go into that a little bit more. But overall, the cost of an installation, whether it be in a public location or in a condo or something, basically anywhere other than your single-family home, the cost can range from $4,000 to up to $25,000 or beyond, really depending on what type of infrastructure you need to put in, like transformers and so on. But a simple project is about $6,000 to $8,000 per station.
I know we have some local folks that are like doing advertising, and you pull up to the charging station and you charge, but then they put advertising on the videos, on the screen, and that's how they recover some revenues. Are there other methods that are being put in publicly where people can like run their charge card and actually pay for the power? Because it seems to me that Hawaiian Electric's doing some stuff, they're putting charging stations out there, but it's really, somebody's got to make money off of it to really get it going. And I don't think folks mind paying for their electricity out there to charge their vehicle. And it would probably also help with people not overstaying their visit to the charging station.
Sure.
If they're paying for it. So
It's true. That's a good
much
model.
going on in that area.
Yeah, in terms of the return on investment, considering the cost to install versus your return on that, I think it is challenging, and there are a few different mechanisms or models that are out there, like the free charging via advertising. That really helps to offset the cost of charge for drivers. And I think there may be a partnership or a cost share partnership there when they install, but that comes down to the individual charging company. And there have been some utility models that are interesting to where the utility can help to install charging stations, similar to what you said with Hawaiian Electric. And a lot of mainland utilities are looking to see how they can get in the game and help to solve that challenge of the cost of infrastructure, knowing that that's one of the big hurdles in terms of laying out a network.
Right. Okay, next slide's up, and this goes into what then?
Yeah, so this is a flow chart that was put together for the electric vehicle working group geared towards apartments, condos, multi-unit dwellings. We had that working group last year and submitted a final report to the legislature, and that report is up on our website at electricvehicle.hawaii.gov. And this was helpful to show the working group members really the challenges that exist when EV drivers try to put charging stations in condos or property managers for that matter. Right now, Hawaii does have a law in the books that states if you are a resident of a multi-unit dwelling and you want to put, and you have an electric vehicle and you want to put in a charging station, your condo association, homeowner association can't deny you from doing so. But that law kind of falls short at that point that there's still so many challenges.
Right.
And so that's why the legislature requested this working group to get together to figure out, like, now what, how do we actually install? And so going back to that chart, just wanted to kind of walk through our viewers in terms of the challenges. So an EV driver may they'll have their EV, then they'll request to their board that they want to install a charging station. At that time, the board would then need to make a decision. Sometimes there's lag time. They need to update their bylaws. They may need quorum. They might not meet all the time.
They may need more money. I mean, it's not just installing the station that costs money. You have transformers that may need to be
Totally, and that goes into it. So there might be a time just in that lag time, et cetera, that the driver just gives up. Or they may make a decision, say, let's go forward and let's investigate this. The next step was to really determine if you have capacity within your transformer. And so the next slide shows how once you determine your transformer load capacity, if you have transformer load capacity, great, then you kind of need to figure out, is this going to go in your stall or is this going to go in a community stall, et cetera? And where is that stall? Is it close to electrical capacity? If it's far away, you can see on that side there, it's kind of a roadblock because that's just a lot of money. It gets really cost prohibitive. If it's close by, then you can install the charger, and then that brings in, like, how are we going to bill for the electricity use? And there's a variety of different avenues looking at there. You can make kind of a private agreement where you just give your association some monies, after analysis or whatnot, about how much it's going to cost. You could figure out a third-party sub-meter. There's some challenges a little bit there, but that was an option that was discussed. Or even the concept of the utility exploring sub-metering options. And then if you don't have transformer load, just going to the other side, that brings in the following slide of the opportunity or the needs for you could do energy efficiency measures. Maybe we had heard from some contractors or some industry representatives that showed how they could find extra load capacity by just installing LED lights throughout or
which they should be doing anyway,
or heat pumps or whatnot. And they were able to install a charging station or more so by making those energy efficiency measures. So there's a really interesting connection there. And or you could just straight out and upgrade your transformer, but there's a lot of roadblocks in terms of who's going to pay for it. It's very costly. So just going to the next slide then, wanted to, I think maybe just going through.
There you go.
Didn't want to have this all doom and gloom and wanted just to show that there are actually a lot of opportunities. And would this be a good time to stop or should we continue?
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. That there are a lot of opportunities and that if you were to increase EV charging in those type of residences, multifamily dwellings, that you could enable 1/3 of the households to own EVs. And that chart on the triangle really shows where EV drivers will tend to want to charge up and where are ideal charging locations. But a lot of discussion as part of that working group came out that workplace charging is actually could be an ideal location given that your vehicle may actually be parked more at work than at your condo or at your home. And also the middle of the day has been targeted as a period when EV charging can potentially provide the greatest benefit to the electric grid, and it may not align with the times that you're parked at home, but more so at time when you're parked during the day at work.
I know that during one of our working groups that we had with the energy office, we talked about the potential for putting in basically what you had capacity for in a single or a double charger, but then running an octopus of lines out there that were run by a computer and would switch between vehicles to kind of make the best use of whatever available power you had to charge. Is there any more work being done on anything like that that you know of? Or?
I know there's a lot of R&D out there and looking at different avenues, and I believe that Hawaiian Electric, they are helping to solve the infrastructure problems by installing fast charging stations. And some of those stations or part of that program is to really look at different research and development opportunities. And I think some of them have dual chargers and they'll be able to charge 2 vehicles at one time, but they toggle or whatnot.
Yeah, that'd be perfect because especially in that workplace charging scenario, which is where we got all the renewable sunlight, photovoltaics producing the power that HECO can't necessarily use all the time. That'd be the best time to charge, and that's for a lot of folks. That's during the middle of the day when they're working. That kind of would kind of drive the workplace folks to maybe have a play and have a financial interest in helping us get clean and green.
Yeah, and the U.S. Department of Energy has a large effort towards encouraging employers to offer charging stations to their employees, and it's called the U.S. DOE Workplace Charging Challenge. And there's a lot of support and resources and case studies out there. So if there are any employers here in Hawaii that are interested in going forward and installing charging stations, but they don't really know how to start, that's a really great place to start. And the Energy Office would be happy to partner with them and provide resources.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we're up on a break time. We're going to take a quick short break here, and we'll be back in a few minutes on April 1st, April Fool's Day, for all of you that haven't played a trick on your partners at work. Right after.
Aloha, how you doing? I'm Gordo the Tech Czar, here on Think Tech Hawaii, where we co-host Hibachi Talk, where we talk about technology and bring in all kinds of cool guests. Also, my co-host with me today is
Andrew the security guy. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Think Tech Hawaii, and thanks for watching Hibachi Talk. We also have Angus.
And you there, lad. It's Angus. I bring in all kinds of wee things. Oh, look, you can see my lips moving.
Aloha, my name is Jeff James, and I'd like to invite you to watch my show, The Military in Hawaii. It'll be shown every Friday at 11 a.m. here on thinktech.com. Aloha.
Hey, welcome back to Stan the Energy Man on my lunch hour at DBED. So welcome to our show today. We got Makena up next to talk a little bit and pick up where Margaret left off on her discussion of charging stations and condominium challenges. So what do you got to add there, Makena?
Well, I really appreciate all of Margaret's and the Energy Office's work in this, because in my research on what are the barriers to EV adoption, having public charging stations is seen throughout the literature, throughout research, across the world as one of the major barriers. And it's identified over and over as a barrier, but there aren't a lot of solution sets that people offer up. So I really think that the work of the Energy Office is really important in pioneering what are the best ways to move forward. And they'll be learning from that we can share here as well as with other places. So one of the things I see is that, really thinking there's sort of two problems here. One is, how do we, affect EV uptake through the provision of charging infrastructure? And also then, how do we maximize the benefits of EVs in terms of integration of renewable energies towards electric vehicles? And one of the I think considerations, as Margaret said, is really workday charging. That given our high levels of solar, that having workday charging is really probably very critical. And right now we don't really have a rate structure that compels that, as well as charging networks that compel that. So those are, I think, where we have to move to thinking about what are those rate structures, what is the infrastructure necessary, and what's the appropriate role for businesses to play in that, as well as government. So I think that's really interesting. And what I wanted to share a little bit about today was thinking about what are some of those factors and considerations in terms of purchasing an EV. I've been working on electric vehicles doing studies on electric vehicles for about a year now through a 4-year grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation, thinking about what are the policies that affect EV uptake, how do we think about the impacts of EVs, and I don't have all the answers to that, but I'm starting the work, and I wanted to share some of that today. So if we could go to my slides. So this is a graphic, sorry, it's a busy graphic, regarding a study that's publicly available through the University of Central Florida's Electric Vehicle Transportation Center website. So if you Google that, you will find this. And this is a study about the total cost of ownership of some popular electric vehicle models that are available in Hawaii in comparison to, we picked the 10 most popular cars that are sold in Hawaii, as well as some of the other vehicles that have really, exact comparables in terms of make and model to the EVs being offered. So an example of that would be the Toyota plug-in Prius in comparison to the Toyota Prius. And when I say total cost of ownership, what we did was we created a pretty simple model of what happens if you own a car for 15 years and drive it 10,000 miles a year. So you've driven a car 150,000 miles. What is it going to cost you over that 15-year time period? And we scaled that, to a present value, so that we can start comparing things apples to apples. So you can see, the general trends here of EVs are on one side and all of the other cars on the other. And in general, EVs are more expensive. This is not considering the federal tax credit. The average EV price from the vehicles considered are about $75,000 in terms of total cost of ownership in that time period, whereas the average internal combustion engine and hybrid electric vehicle price is $62,000. So there's a pretty good price gap still that the federal tax credit does serve to address to some extent. If we can go to the next slide. And here you can see that the total cost of ownership of EVs is brought down as a result of the federal tax credit. And I should explain what that is. It's a up to $7,500 credit in tax forgiveness for buying a qualifying electric vehicle.
So it's on the purchase.
It's on the purchase to the consumer, and it's in the form of tax forgiveness. So you do need that tax liability in order to benefit from it. And I say up to because it's scaled based on battery size. So something like the Nissan Leaf, which is a pure all battery electric vehicle, will qualify for the entire $7,500. And something like the Toyota plug-in Prius, which has it's can
Part
run on
battery,
part
part-
battery, part gasoline.
A hybrid.
Is not going to qualify for the entire 7,500.
Got it.
So that's what we are accounting for here, and you can see that the average EV cost has been brought down pretty substantially to 69,000, almost 70,000. But it's still more expensive than the typical internal combustion engine or hybrid electric vehicle.
I noticed you didn't put my favorite Tesla on there because you didn't want to skew the chart all
I
the
didn't
way.
want to skew the
You
chart.
didn't have enough room on your,
yeah,
on your chart.
we took out the Tesla and we took out the Porsche Panamera
Okay,
specifically
all right.
because the charts wouldn't look very pretty.
Okay.
Then you'd be off
Okay,
it.
so
a
this
little
is the
bit.
real people chart.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and also because we wanted to draw comparisons to the most common vehicles,
Right.
and those aren't the most common.
No.
However,
There's a bunch of them out there.
there
You'd be
are a bunch of
surprised.
them out there.
It's
Yes.
amazing.
In terms of electric vehicles, actually, the numbers might be, pretty high there.
Yeah.
But one of the things I want to point on this chart is you can see that the Nissan Leaf in particular, the total cost of ownership, because it does qualify for the entire federal tax credit, actually is very cost competitive
Right.
with other vehicles.
That's right there.
They have really good lease deals as well.
Yes.
Very, very good.
And actually, in this paper, we do consider the lease option as well. So
Yeah,
if you're
that's an
interested in
attractive
leasing,
option.
then it is a very attractive option, depending on your expected ownership time.
2 weeks ago, I had Congressman Mark Takai on the show.
Mm-hmm.
He's on his third Leaf.
'Cause he's been leasing it.
driving forever and ever.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
He's a big fan. All right. So
Actually,
next
we go
slide.
back to our slides. Next slide. This is just slicing out the fuel cost component of this, and I thought this could be interesting because we think about the barriers to EV adoption generally as being the upfront cost, and I think that's true. The upfront costs are clearly higher, although the federal tax credit helps. But where the fuel costs are also a major cost component of driving, and it varies a lot. And in Hawaii, where electricity rates are really high, I think that's an ongoing question of, how do EVs compare to other vehicles? So here what we did was we built a couple of statistical models in order to project out electricity rates over time in comparison to gasoline costs over time. And we based that in the EIA's annual energy outlook forecasts. To say what happens if there's low gasoline and electricity costs, and those move to some extent together because of our dependency on oil
Right,
within
for
electricity, although that link is getting less and less.
Right.
And then what happens if it goes on the other spectrum to high gasoline and electricity costs.
Mm-hmm.
And what we find is that electric vehicles really shield you from that high gasoline and electricity cost period, right? Because there's more pass-through of high oil prices into the gasoline markets than electricity, because we have more and more of a delinkage as a result of adopting renewable energies.
And does this include the taxes on the gasoline when you put it, when you have those costs in there? Because that adds quite a bit too, and you're not paying all those road taxes and stuff when you're paying for EV electric charging.
Yes, to some extent this does. It wouldn't account for any changes or proposed changes
Okay.
in that, but to some extent it does in a baseline because it was calibrated to existing gas prices. That said, so even though it shelters you against that high gas price scenario, they don't perform as well on average.
Mm-hmm.
So on average, the EV fuel prices are more expensive than internal combustion engine and hybrid electric vehicle fuel prices for the vehicles that we looked at here.
Okay.
And in the case where oil prices are low, which happens to be the state of the world we're currently in, it's actually likely for electric vehicle fuel prices to be higher than particularly hybrid fuel prices. So if you look all the way on the right-hand side, the Toyota Prius, that's the vehicle that performed best in terms of fuel prices and sensitivity to fuel price changes.
Okay.
Did you guys look at time of use rates with Hawaiian Electric, how they offer and how the differential, how that would impact or what is a sweet spot in terms of time of use rates?
We did in the report look at the proposed time of use rates or the pilot EV
The
time
pilot
of use
one.
rates.
Yeah.
And I'm having a exactly what we found.
That's okay.
But we did not.
Sorry, I caught you off guard.
But we didn't look at what would be sort of an optimal time of use rate, because I
Yeah.
think that has to do with this integration question that's a lot bigger than just thinking about EVs, right?
Right.
It's how do EVs play a role in serving the grid,
Right.
to manage intermittent resources.
Right.
So we didn't necessarily go into that yet, but that is somewhere where our research is heading.
Right, because it may not just be, oh, go ahead.
So, the next thing I wanted to share was around greenhouse gas emissions. So there's multiple considerations when thinking about what vehicle to purchase. Cost, the financial cost being only one. I think a lot of people are also want to know about environmental impacts. And here, this is just a quick graphic to show this is our sort of typical electric sector generation in 2015. And if we go to the next slide, if we think about how electric vehicles we considered, how they perform next to other cars with today's electricity mix. So if you're just sort of plugging in on average today during different times of the day, what would that mean? We scaled this graphic to the Toyota Prius because it actually performed best in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And so we have the difference in the total cost of ownership on the vertical axis and the change in greenhouse gas emissions on the horizontal axis. And with all of the red squares, those are all of the internal combustion engine vehicles. So they're typically less efficient, although they vary, right? And you can see that from a greenhouse gas perspective, they don't perform all that well, right? They tend to have more emissions.
Right.
The hybrid electric vehicles, on the other hand, from a greenhouse gas perspective today, tend to perform pretty darn well. So we see the Toyota Prius performs the best. And this is because these are, although they also have variation, these are incredibly efficient gasoline vehicles. With today's generation portfolio, given we still are heavily dependent on oil and also use a tremendous amount of coal, electric vehicles don't perform all that well, right? So let's take the Nissan Leaf. We have battery electric vehicles in those green dots and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles in the orange triangles. So the Nissan Leaf and the Toyota plug-in Prius are among the best performing EVs
In Hawaii? These
yeah.
Hawaii figures?
Yeah, these are Hawaii, yes,
Yeah.
Hawaii-specific figures. From an environmental perspective, this is not including the federal tax credit, but you can see there is, so this shows that they are more expensive and today more greenhouse gas emitting if you're sort of plugging in whenever. But we wanted to show the sensitivity of this because basically electric vehicles are highly sensitive to how they're fueled, right? The electric generation that you use.
Right.
So if we can go to the next slide. This is the assumption that moving forward to our renewable portfolio standard goals, which are quite aggressive, that suddenly this starts to change pretty dramatically and fairly quickly. So this is a 15-year ownership model. So if you buy an electric vehicle in 2015 and you drive it to the year 2030, then what is the greenhouse gas emissions profile over that time period? And the major assumption here is that we feel the need to get to 40% sales of our electricity through renewable sources, all by what can be considered zero carbon renewable energy, so solar and wind. So if that's the case, then electric vehicles start to perform much better. So keeping the same scale with using Toyota Prius as sort of an anchor, we see that the Nissan Leaf in terms of emissions has moved to the left pretty dramatically, as did the Ford Focus Electric, which are the two all-battery electric vehicles. If we go to the next slide, this was a what if, right? To show that, basically to show the sensitivity. If we're kind of to Margaret's point that right now we're not necessarily having daytime charging necessarily, probably a lot of people are going in and plugging in at night. And so depending on what island you're on, that'll really vary the kind of electricity you're using. But say, just for argument's sake, say you could say on the weekend, you're definitely charging into solar PV when you're home, for PV owners. Then you see that electric vehicles perform much better than the Toyota Prius on this slide. So even just having 2 days of a week charged through an all renewable generation source, you see the electric vehicles start to do quite well.
So let's be hypothetical here. Let's call that section to the left in the negative zone, the baby boomer zone like me. Guys getting into retirement, they're home all day, they have a single family home with PV on the roof. That's where they're at too, right? Because they're actually charging mostly off of their own solar. And that's the scenario kind of that we're looking at, except this is built on the whole grid.
Right.
But that's kind of what we look like if we're retired and charging at home and we have a single family home and charging our Tesla on our own photovoltaic.
I don't believe that you're home all day long, though.
I'm not.
I think you're out.
But a lot of my
surfing or
friends
something.
are.
In theory. So yeah, I think that's the point, right? Is that for some people who have the ability to charge at home right now, this may be what your profile looks
Yeah,
like.
okay.
It could be even better than that. But we really wanted to capture what is the typical thing going on
Sure.
today as well, which looks a lot less rosy. But so I think the message here is how we move forward in terms of renewable energy adoption, and then particularly how we think about pricing structures that really signal, the correct things when to plug in, when not to plug in,
Okay.
in terms of not just pricing, but also greenhouse gas emissions, I think are really important.
Well, that brings us up on our next break, and we'll be taking a few seconds off here and coming back to look at the future of EVs in Hawaii.
You're watching Think Tech Hawaii, 25 talk shows by 25 dedicated hosts every week, helping us to explore and understand the issues and events in and affecting our state. Great content for Hawaii from Think Tech.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hittel, and I host a show, Climate Change Beyond Outrage. In it, we go beyond outrage to look at solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. Join me every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Hawaii Standard Time. See you then.
Aloha, this is Maria Mera, and I'm here to invite you to my bilingual show, Viva Hawaii on Think Tech Hawaii, every other Monday at 3 p.m. We're here to inform, motivate, and entertain you. Join us. Hola, soy María Mera y estoy aquí para invitaros a mi show bilingüe Viva Hawaii en Think Tech Hawaii cada 2 lunes a las 3 de la tarde. Estamos aquí para informaros, motivaros y entreteneros. Apuntaros.
Welcome back to my lunch hour. Stan Energy Man here with Margaret Larson and with Makena Coffman, Dr. Coffman from UH and Margaret from the Energy Office. And we're trying to figure out how to make electric vehicles work in the future. And, one of the questions that comes up is exactly how capable is industry or the utility or the infrastructure into meeting some of the goals that we've set. Hawaii set a pretty high standard for the grid to be 100% renewable by 2045, but we have to buy cars that manufacturers make, and that's based on a worldwide market. Although we may be really aggressive in Hawaii in solar and renewable energy, the rest of the world may not be up to where we're at, and they're not going to be making as many cars. So what's kind of a realistic prediction of where we would be in the transportation sector by 2045 based on some of your research?
Okay, I have a forecast right in front of me.
Good.
As part of our research, one of the first things we wanted to get a handle on was what is the literature saying about possible EV uptake in other places, and what are the factors that affect EV uptake, and then how might we think about that with Hawaii's current rate of EV uptake as well as vehicle fleets. So we basically applied some literature estimates in terms of EV sales, EV adoption, to a fleet turnover model for Hawaii. And one of the things we could, in doing this, is we compared, other vehicles, how aggressively were they adopted over time? For example, the transition to automatic transmissions or diesel vehicles, right? And sort of in the most aggressive, there was a 15% rate of uptake in automatic transmissions.
So that kind of gives us an idea of what the industry can absorb in terms of
Yeah,
transition.
it gives kind of a nice benchmarking
Okay.
that a class of models in terms of consumer adoption models uses to look at other technologies and think about how do we absorb this new technology. And the general thinking is the more disruptive the technology, the lower the uptake rate.
Right.
Even though over time you might pass something, right? Because is kind of like a, how do you get to critical adoption, right? But the more disruptive the technology, sort of the harder it is to get off the ground. And arguably EVs can be considered more disruptive because of the charging network needs that Margaret explained. So anyways, in this study, we looked at other places and we looked at other vehicle technology adoption pathways, and we applied this to a Hawaii-specific fleet turnover model. And we found that like with a very aggressive adoption rate, so by I think 2040, having a roughly 30% of new car sales coming from electric vehicles, and this would be a fairly aggressive adoption rate, slightly surpassing the transition to automatic transmissions.
Okay, right.
That we would have about 250,000 EVs on the road in the year 2040, and this would translate to about 15% of cars.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that gives us that. For the project, it gave us a sort of a sense of magnitude of what can we think about. And as we move forward with the project, we're now thinking about, well, what does that mean for the grid? What does that mean for using EVs as a tool for potentially smoothing sources of intermittent energy in order to help meet some of these aggressive energy goals?
Okay.
I should say that that was our high scenario, right? Our reference scenario was something closer to having about 8% of cars on the road in the year 2040. And a lot of it is cars are slow to change because, you know, you keep your car for 10 plus years, right? And so if we think about scrappage rates in comparison to purchase rates and factoring all of that in, you have to have some pretty aggressive new car sales as a portion of EVs in order to get to high levels of EVs on the road.
Okay. So when you put it on a timeline, it's
Gotta
tough
get
to make
started.
that. Yeah, even we started right now, we're on a pretty steady but slow, steady climb to adopt new technology.
Yeah, and it is, I mean, actually it's fairly rapid right now. I mean, the first few years of EV adoption in Hawaii were fairly rapid. Margaret said that, you know, there are about 4,000 EVs on the road today, would you say about 0.5%
Of all.
of all cars
Yeah.
on the road.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of car sales, it's about 4 to 5%, right?
Wow.
So you have car sales
Right.
have to be a much higher number
Right,
in comparison to what's actually going
to pick up the average.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's
Okay.
encouraging that new vehicles coming out have batteries that allow your range to be extended
Right.
much further than
Right.
a lot of the vehicles that are on the road today. Like Tesla, you know, announced yesterday, or they unveiled their Model 3 yesterday, and people are putting down payments, and that vehicle gets $250 or more, and Chevrolet is putting out their Bolt, and so it's nice to see that although the charging infrastructure will of course still need to be there, just because that's how you fuel up your vehicle. However, the further you can go, the limitations become maybe not so challenging or not so needed. It could be easier if you can drive faster, then you can really be more pointed on where you.
So,
Particularly in an island.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
Oahu,
definitely.
and we have different islands. So what works on Oahu isn't necessarily going to work on the big island, but you know, for the density of population that we have here, we actually have a pretty good scenario on Oahu, unless you happen to live in Haleiwa or something and work in Kokohead. I mean, you've got pretty reasonable as range gets a little bit longer.
For charging infrastructure?
Well, at least for the ranges that the vehicles can go without worrying about whether you're going to be able to get home or not.
Sure, there's
So-
still a little bit of range anxiety, and I know this just by the phone calls I get from people. I get a lot of calls from EV drivers wanting charging stations up on the North Shore, and they're staying at Turtle Bay or whatnot. And so there is a need, and Hawaiian Electric has stepped up to the table and have been installing fast chargers across the island. I know that they're unveiling another one next week, so that's really good news, because one of the challenges is actually finding partners that are willing and property owners that are willing to actually give up a space where an EV driver can actually plug in.
Yeah, HECO just put one on Ward.
Yep,
And
at their
then
facility there.
they had one up at Dole Cannery. not
And that's
too
been
long
really
ago.
helpful because we haven't had one on the North Shore. So, yeah.
And I think that, you know, the ones that HECO put in were fast charging stations, and I think that's really important to note because
Right.
this issue of range anxiety and travel distance really hinges on charging time,
Right.
not so much as the availability of stations at large, right? Because you're not going to, you know, plan a trip and then think, oh, I mean, maybe some people will, but it's not the most convenient thing and comparable to fueling up at a gas station today. to go and say, well, now I've got to sit here for 2 hours
Right.
or more, right? Maybe I'll go see a movie, right? That's not how people are planning their days, right? But if you can charge your vehicle in really short time, then that starts to be much more akin to the system that we're currently used to.
So what kind of things can we encourage Hawaiian Electric to do, or the users to do, or the condominium owners or the employers? What are a good laundry list of things that all those stakeholders can do to help improve the state of infrastructure for charging EVs? What are some of the things we could look forward to or we should be trying to do?
Yeah, some of the outcomes of the working group that we had really focused on how to integrate EV charging in condos, but then in those discussions, some new opportunities and suggestions came out, and looking at, maybe workplace is a more opportune location, and so what are the incentives for employers to install charging stations? And the U.S. government actually brought back the federal tax credit for charging stations, which they had taken away for a year, and now they brought them back, and that's 30% up to $30,000. So as long as you have that liability, which is challenging for the condo side, because oftentimes they're a nonprofit. And we also looked at how to finance charging stations, because it's all bottom line, and that's really one of the main challenges is the infrastructure costs. So we looked at some unique ideas as to where we can find monies either here in the state or outside the state to help cover the cost of deploying charging stations. And some utilities on the mainland are actually doing really unique models where they're supporting the deployment of charging stations and are installing like thousands of charging stations. I know that San Diego Gas and Electric and some other utilities in Southern California received approval from the PUC to install a few thousand charging stations, primarily focusing on outside of the single-family home at some of those more needed areas like workplace and multi-unit dwellings. And they also have this really cool program that looks at vehicle grid integration, and so encouraging drivers to charge up at times where renewables are most abundant, and they're encouraging that through pricing and maybe making it lower price to charge during the day, so you're incentivized to do so.
Price structures, that's something that ECO and the PUC could work on.
Definitely, and so the working group looked at how the utility can continue to support EV adoption and a utility investment or a utility partnership in charging infrastructure, whether it be at the workplace or at condos, could be a benefit to the state.
We've got about 30 seconds left. I'm going to give Makena the last word on what she thinks we could be doing.
Okay, I think I want to broaden it out to think more about, from a workplace standpoint, to think about commuter benefits packages more broadly. I think it's important for employers to really work with their employees to think about what is a suite of solutions for transportation for commuting and other kind of trip chaining needs. So I think EVs and EV charging is like one slice of that, but it could also be integration with public transit. It could also be more supportive, bike lanes, and thinking about people living and working more in similar, the same community. So I think that having a more dynamic and broader conversation is what I want to end with, right?
Great.
So having businesses think about their entire suite of ways that people get around is really important.
All right, well, thanks to both of you for being here
you.
today. Margaret, it's always good to see you. I'll see you in the next meeting we have over at the Energy Office. And Makena, good to meet you, and I'm glad to see the work that you're doing. And I can't believe that I spent this whole time without talking about hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So I got to put that in at the end. Thanks for being here. See you next week on Stand Energy Man. Aloha.